Hi there, class. Faisal here, grade 12, University English, June 15th. We are here to talk about Othello, and let's get right down to that business. So, we're over on Act 3, right? And this might be a longer video because there's a lot to talk about for Act 3, but, well, let's jump right in. Right, so Act 3, it begins with a couple of clowns talking to Cassio, right, and a musician and all that. You don't have to worry about that part. The reason those clowns and musicians are there is because there's usually a clown or a musician or something like that in every Shakespeare play. Some people in Shakespeare's time uh, loved clowns so much that that would be the whole reason that they go to the play, right? So they don't really care about Othello, they don't really care about Desdemona, Iago, right? They're interested in the clown, so you'll usually find a clown of some kind in every Shakespeare play. So don't worry too much about it, though. So, the important part is that Cassio is appealing to Desdemona to get his job back, just like Iago told him. Now, this guy has no bad intention here. He wants his job, and he is not trying to seduce Desdemona or anything like that, right? He wants his job back. So, he and Desdemona are friends, right? When Othello was still courting Desdemona, Cassio was the guy who would carry letters back and forth between them, right? So he and Desdemona are friends from before, right? So asking her for help, since Othello is so mad at him, it actually does make sense, right? So it's not like Cassio is like Rodrigo and just does whatever Iago says, right? Cassio is instead, doing something that, is perhaps sensible, right? So what he's doing with Desdemona makes sense. Now, Desdemona, let's take a look at her on page 93 and 95, right? This is on Act 3, Scene 3, line 19. So, in response to Cassio's pleas, Desdemona says, "Do not doubt that, before Amelia here, I give thee warrant of thy place. Assure thee, if I do vow a friendship, I'll perform it to the last article. My lord shall never rest. I'll watch him ta'en, and talk him out of patience. His bed shall seem a school, his board a shrift. I'll intermingle everything he does with Cassio's suit. Therefore be merry, Cassio, for thy solicitor shall rather die than give thy cause away." So, what that means is that Desdemona agrees to do it, right? She's going to help out her friend here and try to convince Othello to give him his job back, right? So, that's what Desdemona does, and again, nothing untoward here, right? There's no indication whatsoever that Desdemona has any intention with Cassio. She just wants to help out her friend who got fired because he made a mistake the night before. So that is what Desdemona promises, and she's, of course, a nice lady. Now, enter Iago, right? Our devilish Iago here. So, he's the one who set this up. Cassio and Desdemona are talking, right? And this is where, as I said, seeing the play is important, because what we see here is on one side of the stage, right, you've got Cassio and Desdemona talking, right? And then on the other side of the stage, Othello and Iago walk in, right? And what Iago does is he's supposed to point or gesture towards, right, the Cassio and Desdemona, and what he says is, "Ha, I like not that," right? So he says that when he sees Cassio and Desdemona talking. So Othello did not hear what Cassio and Desdemona were talking about, right? But Iago takes a look at it and says, "Ha, I like not that." Now, this is the important bit, right? Because what Iago does here is an example of that word we used in our meeting last Friday, cunning, right? Because, let's see here. Othello says, "What dost thou say?" And Iago says, "Nothing, my lord, or if I know not what." "Was that not Cassio parted from my wife?" "Cassio, my lord? No, sure, I cannot think it, that he would steal away so guilty like, seeing you coming." "I do believe 'twas he." Right? So what he's doing there is he is planting a little seed into Othello. He's getting Othello to start thinking, what's going on there? My friend here is saying that he likes not that, and why not? Why does he not like that? Oh, he said that Cassio is leaving guilty like. Huh. Uh, so does that mean that something is wrong here? Am I not seeing something? What does he see that I don't? So part of this is what we call reverse psychology, but again, what he's doing is he's planting a seed into Othello's mind, right? So that's how he gets started here, and the whole scene is all about Iago sort of massaging Othello into believing that there's something wrong here. Let's take a look at some other lines. So, for instance, on page 99 of the PDF, right, line 94, Iago says, "Did Michael Cassio, when you wooed my lady, know of your love?" "He did, from first to last. Why dost thou ask?" "But for a satisfaction of my thought, no further harm." "Why of thy thought, Iago?" "I did not think he had been acquainted with her." "Oh, yes, and went between us very oft." "Indeed?" "Indeed, aye, indeed. Discernest thou aught in that? Is he not honest?" "Honest, my lord." "Honest, aye, honest." "My lord, for aught I know." So, again, what we see is that Iago, he doesn't just come out and say, "Hey, Othello, I think Cassio's sleeping with your wife," right? He doesn't do it that way. Instead, all he's doing is planting the seed, right? He's getting Othello to do the thinking for him, right? By sort of going in the back way, right? He says things like, "Oh, I was just wondering about Cassio and Desdemona. Oh, they were friends before. Okay, interesting. Is Cassio honest? I mean, sure, he's honest, as far as I know, right? So he's getting Othello thinking here, right? He's got Othello sort of dancing in the palm of his hands, and Othello, of course, doesn't know it. Now, it's very important to remember the dramatic irony here, right? Othello thinks that Iago is honest Iago, right? This is a guy that has helped him out, right? He was standing right next to him when Brabantio came to arrest him, and, he thinks, okay, this is a guy who is been trustworthy for me, right? And everything like that, right? He's honest Iago. So Othello has not heard any of Iago's soliloquies, and he has no reason to think that this guy is lying to him, right? So, uh, if you're thinking you're gonna write an essay about Othello being foolish or blind or stupid or anything like that, then please just remember that, right? That dramatic irony is in full effect here, right? So, if you were to write and say Othello should never have trusted Iago in an essay, right? What I will say is, well, how come? What is the thing that Othello has seen from this point that would tip him off into how Iago is a bad guy, right? There's not much there that you can really discuss, right? So if you were to talk about Othello being stupid as your essay topic, right, just know that's not a very strong argument, right, due to dramatic irony. You can still make that argument, right? But don't do it on the basis of he should have known, because there's not much he could have known, right? Considering dramatic irony. Now then, so I don't want to make this a hour-long video, so I'm not going to go through every single little thing Iago does, but what he's doing here is essentially getting Othello to start thinking that, oh, there's something wrong here, that you know, Othello is should be suspicious of what's going on with Desdemona. But one line I want to look at here is line 165, right? This is on page 103 of the PDF, where Othello says, "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. That cuckold lives in bliss, who, certain of his fate, loves not his wronger. Oh, but oh, what damn minutes tells he over." So, first of all, that is what we call, again, the reverse psychology. Othello, don't be jealous. Being jealous is bad. You shouldn't be jealous, right? And of course, Othello thinks, oh, don't be jealous. That means I should be jealous, right? So that's the old reverse psychology thing that Iago is hitting him with here, right? So, Iago again is extremely manipulative. But I want to talk about this other word that he uses, a cuckold, right? So a cuckold is a man whose wife has cheated on him, right? So in Shakespearean times, the word cuckold was, again, a man whose wife cheated, right, in one way or the other, right? Well, as in slept with another man, right? So this was considered a great humiliation and highly shameful thing, right? There was sort of nothing worse that could happen to a man, right? If his wife cheated on him, he was humiliated, he was shamed, right? Everything like that, right? So it was the worst thing you could possibly be. The word, or the belief was that if a man's wife cheated on him, he would grow horns from all of the stress involved, right? So that is what Othello is so afraid of here, right? It's not just about Desdemona cheating on him, right? This would destroy Othello's reputation in society, right? So it doesn't just reflect badly on Desdemona. If she did that, it would reflect bad on him, because all of a sudden he's a cuckold, everyone's laughing at him, and everything like that, right? So Othello hates the idea of being a cuckold, as anyone in Shakespeare's times would, right? So that is what we are discussing there, or what Othello is talking about there, right? So what Iago says there, that cuckold lives in bliss, who, certain of his fate, loves not his wronger, is basically saying, well, if you're a cuckold, it's okay as long as you don't know about it, right? And that is completely, especially to Othello, unacceptable, right? Of course he wants to know. He wants to know if he's being laughed at, everything like that. So, Othello starts to buy this, right? Let's take a look at line 177, right? Othello says, why is this? Thinkest thou I'd make a life of jealousy, to follow the changes of the moon with fresh suspicions? No, to be in doubt is once to be resolved. Exchange me for a goat, when I shall turn the business of my soul to such exfoliate and blown surmises, matching thy inference. 'Tis not to make me jealous to say my wife is fair, feeds well, loves company, is free of speech, sings, plays, and dances well. Where virtue is, these are more virtuous. nor from mine own weak merits will I draw the smallest fear or doubt of her revolt, for she had eyes and chose me. No, Iago, I'll see before I doubt. When I doubt, prove, and on the proof there's no more of this, away at once with love or jealousy. So, the key word in that speech is prove. Othello wants proof, right? That Desdemona uh, is cheating on him, right? He's not going to just be jealous for no reason, right? He wants the evidence. He wants the proof. So, again, he's playing into Iago's hands because who's going to give him proof? Well, it's going to be Iago. So that is when we get to this very important speech. So this is just on the next page, on page 105, right? Yes, where Iago says, this is just on line 203. In Venice they do let heaven see their pranks. They dare not show their husbands their best conscience. Is not to leave it undone, but keep it unknown. So, Iago, right, let me just put it here. As part of his manipulation of Othello, right, tells Othello that the tradition in Venice is for women to cheat and then not let anyone know, right? So here, right, Othello doesn't know the culture as well as Iago does, right? Iago's, he's native, he's from there, right? Whereas Othello is, of course, from outside, right? So, this is how Iago is trying to stop Othello from just asking her, right? Which would be perhaps what you would do first, right? If you were in Othello's situation, well, hopefully you're not, but if you were told, hey, your spouse is being unfaithful, chances are you'd say, well, maybe I should talk to my spouse. But Iago here, by telling him this, is trying to sort of say, no, don't talk to her, talk to me, right? Look at me for help. And he also says one other thing. Let me just find that real fast. On the next page, right? Page 107 on line 228, right? So Iago says this to Othello, right? And before I read this, let me just emphasize, to Othello, Iago is his friend, right? So let's see. Iago says, "Aye, there's the point, as to be bold with you, not to affect many proposed matches of her own clime, complexion, and degree, whereto we see in all things nature tends, foe one may smell in such a will, most rank, foul disproportion, thoughts unnatural." So, what he is saying there to Othello here is, you are not white, and she married you. Doesn't that make her weird, right? So she is essentially saying, right, the whole thing, climb, complexion, and degree, right? That's note number 49 here. Let's find it. Of her own region, race, and social class, right? So complexion particularly means what color you are. And he is essentially saying, well, Desdemona did not marry a white man. She married you, right? And that shows that she is sort of unnatural here, right? So it's important to know, right, based on the soliloquy we're about to talk about, that Iago is pretending to be Othello's friend, best friend perhaps. So he is saying that to him, right, to his face, not as far as Othello is concerned to insult him, but as a sort of way to explain what's happening to him. So from Othello's perspective, right, he's being told, right, you're not the right color, right, not by someone, an enemy, right, not by Brabantio or whatever, but by his own friend, right? And that's what brings us to the soliloquy. Let's see here. So, those of you interested in writing about racism, especially internalized racism, in your essays, pay attention to this because this is super important. This is on the bottom of page 107 in the PDF, top of page 109, right? This speech right here, Act 3, or Act 3, Scene 3, or line 258, right? So this is your Othello's first soliloquy in the story, right? Iago leaves, right? Iago and Othello is talking to the audience. So what he is saying here is his honest truth. He says, "This fellow's of exceeding honesty and knows all qualities with a learned spirit of human dealings. If I do prove her haggard, though that her jesses were my dear heart-strings, I'll whistle her off, and let her down the will to pray at fortune. Haply, for I am black, and have not those soft parts of conversation that chamberers have, or for I am declined into the vale of years. Yet that's not much. She's gone. I am abused, and my relief must be to loathe her. O curse of marriage, that we can call these delicate creatures ours, and not their appetites! I had rather be a toad and live upon the vapour of a dungeon, than keep a corner in the thing I love for others' use. Yet 'tis the plague of great ones, prerogatived as are they than the base. 'Tis destiny unshunned, like death. Even then this forked plague is fated to us, when we do quicken, Desdemona comes." So, this thing to focus on here is, or at least at first, is the "haply for I am black" line there, right? Because there we see a clear case of internalized racism, right? He is now saying the things that Iago just said to him about how his being black is something negative, right? So he is echoing his friend, quote unquote, Iago there, right? He is essentially agreeing with Iago that, he seems to think that because of his skin color, Desdemona might not really love him, and that he is not well spoken or eloquent, right? That's what he means, by the way, when he says that he has not the soft parts of conversation that chamberers have, right? Essentially, he's saying, I don't speak very well, which is nonsense, by the way, right? We know from the first act that this guy speaks very, very well, but it is nevertheless something that clearly is bothering him. So this is a soliloquy, so it is Othello's true internal thoughts, and what we're seeing in that soliloquy is that he doesn't actually have as much self-esteem as you might think, right? And I hope you look at that speech and think, wow, that makes me feel very sorry for him, right? Because he is essentially thinking that he is inferior. Now, we talked about internalized racism in the call on Friday, but just to be clear, right, what internalized racism is you when someone is a racist against themselves, right? When someone is, essentially thinking, well, because I am of a certain race, I am not good at certain things, or perhaps even good at certain things, right? So it's the idea that because of one's race, right, you have to behave a certain way, or you can't do some things, or you can do others, right? So it would be like, I'll use myself as an example. My thinking, Muslims are terrorists, right? So, I shouldn't associate with other Muslims because they're terrorists, or I am going to be a terrorist one day, or something like that, right? So it's that kind of, racism against oneself, right? That Othello is exhibiting here. So that's one thing we see in this soliloquy. Oh, and by the way, before I talk about the other thing, let me just say, right, because I've been getting some questions from you guys, and they're good questions. Uh, if you intend to do an essay about racism for this particular play, right, I usually say what you need to do is decide which kind of racism you want to focus on, right? Because you could write an essay about like the society's racism, the Duke, the Brabantio, Iago, Rodrigo, right? All of those people who are racist against Othello, Amelia, who we'll talk about later, or you could talk about Othello's racism against himself. I think trying to do both at once is too much for 1,000 words, right? So, just so you know, if you're trying to make that kind of essay, you should take that into consideration. Okay, so there's that, but there's also the way that Othello views women, view of Desdemona and women in general, right? Because he also says something very interesting. When he says, "O curse of marriage, that we can call these delicate creatures ours, and not their appetites." Right? So this is the other side of the speech that I wanted to talk about, right? So he looks at Desdemona as a piece of his property, right? So again, when he says that word ours, that's possessive, right? As if, I would say, oh, our food or our house or our car, right? So when he's talking about that, ours, right, he's referring to men, right? So what he's thinking about is that men own women as property, right? That is how he regards the issue, right? And uh, there's a lot to talk about there, right? Um, let's imagine a different play, right? So, again, I'm saying imagine. This is not really the case, but imagine that that Desdemona really was cheating on Othello like that, right? So they just had the honeymoon, and here the lady is cheating already. Uh, the appropriate thing to do, right? You would think that he would just divorce her, right? If that were the case, right? But instead, he feels he should kill her, right? And, well, the reason for that, we'll talk about this more as we get through this play, is that Othello does really look at Desdemona as his property, as something that he owns and something that, he holds in his own hands and that he should be able to do with as he pleases, right? So, um, what that tells us is, well, it makes us ask the questions. Does Othello really love Desdemona? Or does he just look at her as part of his own property? Right? That's a question you can ask in this play. If we had more time, right, which I don't think we do, um, because you guys have to work on your essay, but that would be one of my questions of the week. I'm not going to give you guys any more of those because you guys need to do your essays. So I'm gonna stop that. But nevertheless, that is a question to sort of ask at this point. So let me speak quickly to Amelia before I wrap this video up. I think that I'm going to have to do 2 videos on Act 3, right? Because so much happens in Act 3. Act 3 is really the heart of the play. But Amelia, she is Iago's wife, right? So Iago's married himself, right? Well, remember, by the way, that there was that rumor that Iago was reacting to for why he hates Othello, that said that Othello slept with his wife, right? So here's that wife that he was so worried about, right? So she is acting as Desdemona's maid or servant, right? That's sort of her job, right? Is to take care of Desdemona, and she is sort of a background character previous to this, right? You just sort of see her around, but she ends up being quite important later on in the play. So let's pay attention to Amelia here. Some of you might end up writing essays about Amelia. So let's take a look. Amelia says, "I am glad to have found this napkin. This was her first remembrance from the moor. My wayward husband hath 100 times wooed me to steal it, but she so loves the token, for he conjured her she should ever keep it, that she reserves it evermore about her, to kiss and talk to. I'll have the work taken out, and give it to Iago. What he will do with it, heaven knows, not I. I nothing but to please his fantasy." So, she steals a handkerchief from Desdemona, uh, and it's important, this is a soliloquy, so you should know that at the time she steals it, she does not know why she is doing it, right? Iago told her to do it, but she says here, and remember it's a soliloquy, so she's not lying. What he will do with it, heaven knows, not I, right? So she's just doing it because, well, that's her husband, and he told her to, right? So that's what she's doing. Now, handkerchiefs are important in the era before the invention of tissues, right? Nowadays, you get a tissue, you blow your nose, right? But a handkerchief is a lot more important when tissues don't exist, right? It's something like this, right? You know, a little handkerchief with embroidery and all that. But the important thing about it is it was, oops, I have that wrong. Oops. Othello's first gift to Desdemona, right? So when they were courting and he wanted to sort of tell her, "Hey, I like you," right? He gave her this as a first gift, right? So it has a lot of sentimental value, right? And Iago, in a soliloquy, explains exactly what he intends to do with this thing, right? He says, "I will in Cassio's lodging lose this napkin, and let him find it. Trifles light as air are to the jealous confirmation strong as proof of holy writ. This may do something. The moor already changes with my poison. Dangerous conceits are in their natures poison, which at the first are scarce found to distaste, but with a little act upon the blood, burn like the mines of sulphur." Right? So the plan is pretty straightforward. You'll remember Othello says, "I want proof that Desdemona is cheating on me." Iago says, "Sure, I'll get you proof." And what he does is he's stolen this handkerchief, the first gift that Desdemona gave to him, and he is going to give it to Cassio, right? And so the hope is that Othello will see Cassio walking around with Desdemona's handkerchief, and he will think, "Oh, Cassio got that uh, from Desdemona, and therefore they're cheating on each other." So this is, again, Iago trying to produce that so-called proof. Now then, this video is running past half an hour, right? And I think we should probably leave it there, right? At least for now. So for tomorrow, we will be talking about the rest of Act 3, right? Which again is the heart of the play. And we'll be talking more about Othello's jealousy. So, guys, I hope you have found ways to read or watch the play, right, as I've been advising. And make sure you are at the end of Act 3, page 133 for tomorrow's video. And make sure also that you continue to send your essay questions to me, right? I've been trying to respond right away to any emails I get, so please send. I will make a couple of suggestions, and we will leave it there. So until then, I hope that Othello is going well. I hope your essays go well too, and I will see you guys next time.